we've all been there, right? That whole like dieting thing, you psych yourself up. You're like, this time I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to finally lose the weight. And then like 2 weeks later, you're elbow deep in a bag of chips, wondering how it all went wrong.
Yeah, totally. It's like you set out with the best of intentions, all that willpower,
Yeah.
and then boom, the cravings hit and you're right back where you started.
So frustrating. And it makes you feel like you failed, right? Like it's a personal weakness or something.
Exactly. That's the thing. This book we're going to be diving into today, it really challenges that whole idea of dieting being a battle of willpower.
Right. So it's not just me.
Definitely not.
Okay, good to know. So this deep dive, we're going to be looking at this book that's saying there might be a different way to approach weight loss.
A more kind of cooperative approach instead of like the constant struggle.
I like that. Cooperation, not combat. Okay, so what's this book all about?
Well, right off the bat, the author talks about how common this whole diet binge remain cycle actually is.
Oh, I'm sure they're right. I mean, everyone I know has been on like a million diets.
Right. It's crazy. And get this, they actually did research at UCLA
Oh, wow.
and found that like 2/3 of people who go on diets end up gaining all the weight back.
No way. Seriously.
Yeah, and often they end up even heavier than they were before they started the diet.
Ouch. That is not encouraging. But I guess it does kind of validate that feeling that it's not just about willpower.
Exactly, like there's something else going on here, something deeper.
Okay, so 2/3 of dieters end up heavier. That's pretty bleak, but I guess it's better to know the reality, right?
Right, and especially for younger people, like teenagers who are already dealing with so much pressure about their bodies.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't even thought about that.
There was this 5-year study, and it showed that teens who diet are actually twice as likely to become overweight as teens who don't.
Whoa, that's scary. Like it's almost doing the opposite of what it's supposed to do.
Exactly. It really makes you question if all that restriction is actually doing more harm than good.
It's like setting them up for a lifetime of struggle with food and their weight.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important to understand why these diets fail in the first place.
Right, so it's not just about willpower. What else is going on?
Well, the book digs into this, and it turns out that restricting what you eat, like with a super strict diet, can actually make you crave those forbidden foods even more.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense. It's like the more you tell yourself you can't have something, the more you want it.
Right. It's like the whole forbidden fruit thing.
Like when you were a kid and your parents told you not to touch something, you just wanted to touch it even more.
Exactly. It's like a psychological rebellion against the rules.
Okay, so our minds are working against us, but is there like a biological reason too? Like why do our bodies seem to sabotage our efforts?
Oh, definite. There's this whole biological component as well. It's pretty fascinating.
All right, I'm all ears. Lay it on me.
So when you drastically cut calories, like on a really restrictive diet, your body basically freaks out.
Freaks out in what way?
It senses this prolonged deprivation as a threat, like a famine.
Oh, wow. Like it thinks we're starving.
Exactly. And it goes into this like conservation mode to try to protect you.
Survival mode.
Yep. So it slows down your metabolism.
To conserve energy.
Yep. And it starts storing more fat as a way to ensure your survival, like it's stocking up for a long winter.
Wow. So our bodies are literally working against us, trying to hold on to every calorie.
Right. It's not about willpower. It's about biology. Your body's just doing what it's programmed to do to survive.
But then what happens when you go off the diet and you start eating normally again?
That's the kicker. Even after you go back to normal eating, a lot of people find it really hard to keep the weight off.
Because their metabolism is still messed up.
Exactly. It's been recalibrated by that period of restriction. So it's easier to gain weight back, and often even more weight than you lost.
So it's like you're setting yourself up for failure from the start.
In a way, yeah, it's not just about the immediate frustration of cravings and gaining the weight back. It's about those long-term changes to your metabolism that make it harder to manage your weight down the road.
So like years of yo-yo dieting could really mess up your metabolism.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to find a more sustainable approach, one that works with your body instead of against it.
Okay, so this book has thoroughly depressed me by explaining why diets don't work, but I'm assuming it doesn't just leave us there, right? There's got to be a better way.
Don't worry, it does. It offers a different path. This whole idea of cooperating with food instead of fighting against it.
Okay, so instead of battling our bodies and our cravings, we team up with them.
Yeah, it's about shifting your mindset from restriction and control to one of respect and understanding.
Sounds way less stressful.
Right. And ultimately, it's about working with your body instead of against it.
Cooperation, not combat. I like it. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of how to actually do that, what are your initial thoughts? Like, what really struck you about this whole idea of why diets backfire?
What really gets me is how much our mindset, like our beliefs and our thoughts about food, how much that impacts our relationship with food.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, if you're constantly thinking, I can't have that, or I'm being bad, That's got to affect how you feel about eating.
Totally. We often approach dieting with this like us versus them mentality, you know? Like our bodies are the enemy we have to conquer.
Yeah, it's like a constant battle.
But the reality is our bodies are amazing. They're these incredibly intelligent and resilient systems. They're not working against us.
They're just trying to do their job.
Exactly. They're trying to protect us. And when we understand that, we can start to shift our approach.
From combat to collaboration?
Exactly. It's a whole different way of thinking about food and our bodies.
So instead of seeing food as the enemy, we start to see it as an ally.
Right. As a source of nourishment and pleasure that can support our overall well-being.
Okay, that's a pretty big mindset shift. I'm definitely intrigued to learn more about how this cooperation with food thing actually plays out in real life.
Me too. But hey, why don't we let our listeners take a minute to digest all this?
Yeah, good idea. All this talk about food is making me hungry anyway.
Me too.
All right, we'll be back in a jiffy to dive into the practical stuff, so don't go anywhere. All right, so we've talked about how traditional diets often kind of set us up for failure, right? But how do we actually get off that crazy train? Like, how do we move from this I'm at war with my body mentality to actually cooperating with food?
Right, that's the big question.
Wow.
The book has some cool strategies, and one of the first thing it talks about is that inner critic we mentioned before. You know that voice in your head that's always judging what you eat?
Oh, yeah, I know that voice all too well. Like, should you really be eating that?
Yep. It's like having the food police up in your brain.
Totally. But how do we get rid of it? It feels like it's always going to be there.
It takes time, but you got to start by noticing it, like really paying attention to when that voice pops up.
Okay, so become aware of it.
Right? The more aware you are of it, the easier it is to start questioning it. Like, is this really true, or is this actually helpful?
So basically challenge its authority.
Exactly. The book has some good tips for doing that. One is to ease up on the whole calorie counting thing.
Really? I thought counting calories was like the holy grail of weight loss.
A lot of people think that, but it can actually make things worse.
How so? I mean, shouldn't you at least have some idea of how many calories you're eating?
It's not about ignoring calories altogether. It's more about shifting your focus. Like instead of obsessing over numbers, try tuning into your body's cues.
Like hunger and fullness.
Exactly. When you're constantly counting calories, it's easy to get disconnected from those natural signals.
So you're saying instead of relying on external rules like calorie counts, we should be listening to our internal cues.
Right. It's about trusting your body's wisdom.
Okay, that makes sense. Another tip the book mentions is to not get too caught up in food labels.
Yeah. Like it's good to be informed about ingredients and stuff, but sometimes those labels can be a trap.
Right, like you end up spending more time analyzing the label than actually enjoying your food.
Totally. And it can keep you stuck in that restrictive mindset. You know, like you're constantly looking for what's bad or off limits.
It takes all the fun out of eating.
Right. It turns food into this stressful thing instead of something to be enjoyed.
So it's about finding a balance between being informed and not letting that information control your life.
Exactly. And another key part of cooperating with food is figuring out what's really driving your eating. Like, are you actually hungry? Or are you eating for other reasons?
Oh my gosh, I am so guilty of that. Sometimes I eat just because I'm bored or stressed.
Yeah, it's really common. A lot of people use food to cope with emotions or just to fill a void.
So it's not even about physical hunger, it's like emotional hunger.
Exactly. And the book talks about this cool tool called the hunger scale.
Okay, what's that?
It's a scale from 1 to 10. 1 being like starving, you know, like you could eat a horse.
Angry.
And 10 being painfully stuffed, like you just ate Thanksgiving dinner times 2.
Okay, so 1 is hangry, 10 is Thanksgiving dinner. Where does cooperation with food fit in?
The goal is to stay somewhere between like a 6 and a 7.
So comfortably satisfied.
Exactly. Not too hungry, not too full, just right.
So it's about finding that Goldilocks zone of eating.
I like that, the Goldilocks zone. And to help you get better at recognizing your hunger cues, the book suggests trying mindful eating.
Okay, I've heard of that. What exactly does that mean?
It's basically just paying attention to your food, like really being present when you're eating.
So not just shoving food in your face while you're scrolling through your phone.
Exactly. It could be as simple as taking a few deep breaths before you start eating.
To kind of center yourself.
Yeah. Or really noticing the colors and textures of your food.
Or even just putting your fork down between bites.
Right. It's about slowing down as savoring each mouthful.
Okay, I can see how that would help you eat less, like you'd actually feel more satisfied with smaller portions.
Exactly. It's not about restricting portions. It's about really experiencing your food and letting your body tell you when it's had enough.
So you're saying mindful eating can help with portion control?
Definitely, when you slow down and pay attention, you're more likely to notice those subtle cues of fullness.
Instead of just mindlessly eating until your plate is empty.
Right. And the book also suggests creating a stop eating ritual.
A ritual? Like what?
It could be something as simple as putting your napkin over your plate when you're done.
Okay. Like a signal to your brain that the meal is over?
Exactly. It helps to create a clear boundary and prevent mindless overeating.
I like that. It's like giving yourself permission to stop eating, even if there's food left on your plate.
Right. It's about honoring your fullness cues.
So it's all about those little adjustments, those subtle shifts in perspective and behavior.
And those little things can make a big difference over time.
So we've talked about easing up on calorie counting, tuning into our hunger cues, being mindful about food labels and portions, and creating a stop eating ritual. Anything else from this section that really stood out to you?
You know what I thought was really interesting is how the book talked about movement.
Oh, yeah? What did it say?
It's not about punishing yourself with crazy workouts or anything. It's about finding ways to move your body that feel good.
So, like dancing or going for a walk in nature.
Exactly. It's about choosing activities that you enjoy, that bring you joy.
It shouldn't feel like a chore.
Right. It should be something that you look forward to.
So, ditch the all or nothing mentality. Find what feels sustainable and enjoyable for you.
Exactly. Listen to your body. Find what brings you pleasure and energy.
I'm really loving this whole idea of cooperation instead of this constant battle.
Me too. It's such a refreshing perspective.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into the book. What are your overall thoughts so far? Like, what's resonating with you the most?
You know what really stands out to me? It's the whole idea of self-compassion, like treating yourself with kindness and
Oh,
understanding.
that's so important, especially when it comes to food and body image.
Totally. The book really emphasizes that we're all works in progress. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to not be perfect.
So give yourself a break
Exactly. Let go of that pressure to be perfect and embrace the journey.
with all the bumps and detours.
Exactly. It's not about reaching some imaginary finish line. It's about making peace with yourself right here, right now.
That's a powerful message I think a lot of people need to hear.
Me too. It's so easy to get caught up in self-criticism, especially when it comes to our bodies and our eating habits.
So instead of beating ourselves up, we should be practicing self-love.
Yes. It's about recognizing that you're worthy of love and acceptance no matter what.
That's a beautiful thought, and I think it's a perfect segue into our final takeaway for our listeners.
I agree. Let's wrap things up with some food for thought.
Okay, so we've talked about why diets backfire and some ways to start cooperating with food instead of fighting it.
Uh-huh.
But if someone's listening to this and they're like, all right, I'm ready to make a change, what's like one small thing they can do today to start moving in that direction?
That's a good question. You know what? I think one simple thing could be to just try putting your fork down between bites at your next meal.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. I always forget to do that.
It's easy to get caught up in the moment and just keep shoveling food in your mouth.
Right. But if you pause between bites, you can really taste your food more, and you're more likely to notice when you're actually full.
Exactly. It's a little thing, but it can make a big difference.
So slow down, savor your food, and pay attention to your body's cues.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a great starting point. And I think what I'm taking away from this whole conversation is that it's not about being perfect.
Right.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly. And it's about being kind to yourself along the way.
Yeah, like if you slip up, don't beat yourself up. Just get back on track.
Exactly. And remember, it's a journey, not a destination. So enjoy the ride.
I love that. All right, well, I think that's a wrap for our deep dive into this book.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation.
I've learned a lot, and I hope our listeners have too.
Me too.
So to everyone listening out there, remember, you are amazing, just as you are.
And you deserve to have a peaceful and joyful relationship with food.
Yes, so ditch the diet mentality, tune into your body, and start cooperating with food instead of fighting against it.
You got this.
All right, that's it for this episode of The Deep Dive.
See you next time.
Bye, everyone.